Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good morning, good
Good
afternoon, good
morning.
evening,
Yeah,
wherever you are.
it's been a while.
Yes, it has been a while.
Well, I have my
Long while.
can't show the logo, but I
Oh,
have my cold coffee here,
yes.
very
Well,
large.
I have my I won't show the logo too much. I got my cold drink as well. Anyways.
All right.
Hmm.
Well, I am in
Good to see you.
California.
Very good. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How is Cali? Looks very sunny and lovely.
Oh, the weather. I don't know if you can see. It's just a gorgeous blue sky. It's been in the 70s, low 80s, just
Nice.
constantly every day.
Nice.
Beautiful, beautiful weather. I went disc golfing with my dad the other day in a park in Santa Maria. Yeah, been great. I'm also doing some early footwork for my career change when I come back here. I'm
Okay.
probably aiming to come back early-ish, well, next spring at the latest. Some things sort of unfortunately didn't work out. It doesn't look like I'll be
Okay.
able to do Tokudo before I leave Japan. So
Oh,
that's kind
okay.
of on hold, I guess you
Okay.
could call it.
Oh, oh,
But I'm not giving up on it. It's just
yeah,
it'll have to
definitely. Yeah.
wait a bit.
But it does make it more
Yeah,
challenging if you're going to have to travel back to do Tokudo. If you're moving. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer, but it'll
Yeah.
just have to work out.
Hmm.
So yeah. Well, regarding today's topic, I think it's a
Yes.
good one. Um, and maybe you want to uh, give a little give some background to why this topic and then what your questions or
Sure.
thoughts are on it. And
Sure.
then I have a lot to share on this, actually, it turns
Oh, good.
out. Even though I'm
Perfect.
not, uh, I do agree with you. It'd be good to ask, a minister who is ordained about the more,
Well,
pressing spiritual questions.
y-
But I think we
yeah.
can definitely look at what our tradition teaches and I can also share some of my thoughts.
Okay.
So, that might be
Yeah.
helpful as well.
Yeah, what I meant was about the liturg, if we're going to do like we could, for the if we did it as a liturgical listening
Hmm.
episode, we could discuss what is done
Yeah.
liturgically for funerals or
Yep.
I didn't think you'd be able to do any kind of I didn't until after do you see what I mean? You couldn't actually
Well,
perform the ceremonies or whatever, but we could discuss what the traditions are as far as, but anyway,
hmm
so should I just kind of raise the do shall we do first of all, do we want to do some Nimbutsu first?
yeah. Let me see
Yes.
if I can prop my phone up so I
All
can
right.
do a proper,
All right.
proper gasho here.
Gotcha. Yeah, look,
There
I've
we
got
go.
my yes, yes.
I
These
don't have my ninjas, so
oh
I'm doing
well,
a
and
ninju
yes,
list.
these are Ninju from Nichiren Buddhism. Yes, I'm comfortable with that. I am a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist. Uh, I think they're lovely, actually. They
Oh yeah,
um
yeah,
they
they're
are
beautiful.
the beads at either kind of end with the Buddha bead or the
Hmm.
main bead at either end dangling from that. These in one way
Sorry.
or another, all these different strands kind of dangling from it represent all of the teachings of the Buddha, like
Oh wow.
all the periods of the
Yeah,
teachings. Yeah, so it's kind of cool. I just think
very cool.
I just think they're lovely. But anyway, so I kept them from my explorations of them. I don't mind.
All
I
right.
just don't use
So
them in the same way.
yeah.
But anyways,
Shall we
yeah,
gasho?
yes.
Namo Amida
Amida
Butsu.
Butsu.
Namo
Namo
Amida
Amida
Butsu.
Butsu.
Namo Amida
Namo Amida
Butsu.
Butsu.
Namanda.
Nanda
Namanda.
Namanda Butsu.
Namanda.
Nabuts.
Namanda.
Nam Nam.
All right. So
Yeah.
let's dive into the topic of today's session.
Yeah.
And you want
Excellent.
to introduce it and then just
Yeah.
talk about,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure. Yeah. So basically, recently, m- uh, unfortunately, one of my nephew passed away here in the UK. Um,
Hmm.
and
My
so
condolences.
Thank you, thank you. And kind of whenever I have family or friends or anyone
Mm,
really passing away that I hear of or know, it always, one of the things, I mean, as Buddhists, it's, those things are always on our mind. It's one of those weird things about, being a Buddhist, like death is always on your mind, and in a sense, death and rebirth, and, old age, sickness, aging, sickness, old age, death, birth, you know what I mean? It's always on our mind. Impermanence. It's because it's the basic teaching, really, isn't it? It's just kind of one of the foremost things on our mind all the time. But um, so whenever that happens, that causes me to reflect on that, and as well as the process of death and rebirth, and all those things, those aspects of the teachings as well. But um, one of the things I started doing at some point in the past, um, when I had friends or family pass away, I would, in kind of a sense, I kind of, um, kind of embrace the teachings about the Bardo state, and between sort of on your way to your next birth, that Bardo, that the sort of Bardo state teachings. And I kind of, in a way, mentally kind of reach out to those to that person, to the family member or the friend or whoever it was that had recently passed away, and kind of encourage them to um, to think of Amitabha, think of Amida Buddha, to say Nembutsu, um, to go to his land, if you don't, and if you don't want to repeat the suffering that you've been through, particularly when you know I've had some family members pass on, including recently my nephew, who their life was considerably full of a lot of painful suffering. Um, Partly to their own doing, well, it's all our own doing, isn't it? It's all our own past, causes and karma, both individually and collectively, that we're responsible for. The, um, so I'll say, if you don't want to endure another, lifetime like this, seek Amida Buddha, go, say Nembutsu, entrust to Amida, or if failing that, in the next life, in the next lifetime where you're able to do that, then do that. In the next lifetime where you're able to encounter teachings about Amida, or you know, uh, are in a state where you can say Nembutsu, you know, say the name, think of Amida, wish to go to his land, that sort of thing. Um, I know it's Amida that gives us, yeah, his mind. I know it's Amida that gives us the aspiration. I know that Nembutsu is Amida's call to us, but I do communicate. I try to reach out to them in that Bardo state, in this way. I'm not expressing it very well, as well as I kind of wrote it to you in Messenger, but it just always made me kind of curious what the actual Jodo Shinshu teachings are on these things, and because I'm drawing on you know other traditions of Buddhism that that I know the teachings about, to some degree, um, and trying to approach it in a Jodo with the Jodo Shinshu teaching in mind, but I don't think I've ever really learned that aspect, um, to some degree. In other, with other groups that I've worked with, there was some discussion of that, but then nothing ever really in detail that I learned. So I just would like to, to discuss that. Um, yeah, and just yeah,
Yeah,
discuss that, learn that, discuss that, reflect on it. My, yeah, I think that covers the sort of topic that I had in mind for this,
yeah,
since it's quite
great.
recently on Friday was when we had the funeral and then the
Hmm.
cremation thereafter. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great topic, and uh, well, I have so much to say. And I have a lot to share as well. So, first of all, let me just let me just share a personal story.
Sure.
So, um, my mother's sister, my aunt, I knew that she was sort of in not so great health, um, and and at some point, my mom just she sort of became not a topic of conversation, kind of.
Okay.
And then after a year or so, um, I asked my brother, "Well, what happened to our aunt?" And my brother said, "Oh, well, didn't you hear? She passed away." It's like, "Oh, okay."
Wow.
It's an
Yeah.
interesting way of learning about
Finding
that,
out. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I remember that was a time when someone I knew, a family member. By the way, sorry, there's a road right behind me, and so you may hear like
Traffic
a
over there.
motorcycle go by like we
Yeah.
just did.
That's all
So
right.
if
I,
I'm ever hard to hear, just let me know and
it,
I'll
it
repeat what
hasn't
I'm saying.
nothing. It hasn't affected things so far. It hasn't affected the
Okay,
audio
good.
so
Maybe
far.
there's some noise canceling going on. Anyway,
Okay.
so uh that was a point where I was already, many years Jodo Shinshu, a Shin Buddhist. And I felt an urge or a desire to perform a simple, soshiki, or not technically a funeral service, but because obviously the funeral was already over by that point. But just a sort of memorial service,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
by myself, reciting
Yep.
Shoshinge is how I imagined it, and then saying Nimbutsu. Um, as Shoshinge is always the core of everything we do, uh, liturgically speaking, in Jodo Shinshu. And I just felt the desire to do that. Now, unfortunately, I was busy at the time. I never got around to it. So unfortunately, I never did it. Um, but the thing is I could do it anytime, and I should do it because I feel the need to um, memorialize and commemorate, my aunt's life, and in that way, which is, I think, a very meaningful way. And she was not a Buddhist, of course, but she was always very much a spiritual seeker, I think, in a lot of ways, and I you know from an early age, I'd always been, I always enjoyed spending time with her. I would say we were fairly close. So I only bring that up to share as a personal example of, you don't need to be ordained. There's no difference really between,
Yeah.
the Nimbutsu that's said by a person who has Tokudo and not. It's all the same. We're all, equals on a spiritual level. So, and there's nothing to, and this is important. So the organization that you were a member of for a while before, which we won't name here, but they had a very really non-Shinshu approach to a lot of things, and this was one of them. So I think it would be a good idea to discuss in more detail the, like you mentioned,
Hmm.
Bardo. Well, what
Hmm.
is that? Most people are going to be like, isn't that some sort of Tibetan idea? Um, and well, yes and no. Because yes, the idea that there's a book and you read out of it and sort of guide the person is a Tibetan idea. That's something that's unique, as far as I know, to
Vajrayana.
Tibetan Vajrayana.
Yeah.
And the person who does that has to be a very advanced
Yeah.
practitioner.
Yeah.
And the person who is I think even the object of that sort of thing has to have like prepared themselves. You don't just go into the Bardo in that tradition like, oh, cold turkey and then expect to,
Yeah.
and so one problem with an organization like the one you remember before, just sort of cherry picking these things and then making stuff up about
Yeah.
them is,
Yeah.
well, these things have history, tradition. You can't just tear things out from other traditions of Buddhism without the context, right? Because then it becomes meaningless. So first, what
Just
I'd like to
can I just
do?
interject something here, really
Yes,
quick,
please.
just there.
Yeah.
I had done this sort of thing, like I was talking about, just these
Mm-hmm.
brief kind of prayers or whatever you want to call them, reaching out to that the relative or the friend or whoever it was in the Bardo state, just brief, and I would do it for weeks or months, because I know sometimes someone can be in the Bardo state for a while, whatever. Anyway, so or that's the teaching anyway.
Well,
And
we'll
what
talk about
yeah, we'll
exactly
talk
how
yeah,
long
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah, yeah,
supposedly
yeah,
are in the
exactly.
Bardo
So
state, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly. We'll get but what I want to say is that I did that before I did this. I knew of those teachings long before I was part of the organization that you're kind of referring to. So, this is something I had done already. Do you know what I mean? Had already kind of,
Gotcha. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
was already kind of in the habit of doing, just because it just
Mm-hmm.
seemed to me, especially when I got to Pure Land Buddhism, when I started to explore Pure Land Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu, and felt a kind of before that I didn't really feel a kind of necessarily freedom to do that.
Yeah.
I felt like, oh, that was something that you should just, but for some reason, at some point, it occurred to me, you know, I could just, I could just do that. I think of them anyway. I think of my thoughts, and I think, oh, I wish they had heard the Jodo Shinshu, the Pure Land teaching, and I wish they knew about Amida. At some point, I just thought of that Bardo teaching, and I thought, well, why don't I just, you know,
Mm-hmm.
do that
Right.
as, I know I'm a bamboo. I know I'm not a priest or anything, but, do you
Well,
know what I mean?
priests are
Yeah,
bamboo
no,
too.
exactly. But do you know what I mean? I'm not a
Yes.
trained, but
Yeah.
it's just my
Um,
own self, my own, I'm not trying to
right.
do any kind of
As a
ritual.
personal kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do any kind of ritual. I'm not trying to do
Mm-hmm.
any kind of, you know, formal teaching. I'm just saying, look, this is my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fellow samsaric being, sufferer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know there's the possibility this could be different for us.
Yeah.
And so here's you know what I
Right.
mean? Do this if you can, either now or at some point in some future birth. But anyway,
Mm. Yeah. And I want to be clear. No, I'm sharing like our tradition's point of view,
yeah,
but that doesn't mean that don't take it as a critique necessarily. I'm just sharing you the Shin Buddhist perspective, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
you can do with that whatever you want to do with it, right? But I do as a I kind of have to give you right the POV, as it were, of the
yeah.
of what
That's
we
and that's what I'm
what we're all
asking
about.
for. That's
So
that, that's what that's definitely what I'm asking for. That's what I want to
right.
know is, to know if there's any basis for me to be, for me to do what I've been doing just on a personal, you know, basis
Yeah.
of that. But
Okay,
anyway,
so
yeah,
with that said, let's take a look. There's a few pieces to this puzzle
yeah,
we have to look at. One is, what on earth is Bardo? Because some people won't even know what that means.
yeah,
Um, So let me see. I wonder if I can
The
share
Bardo
my
state.
screen.
Yeah, I've just set it to so you can do it.
Okay. So I'm going to share something in a bit, but basically to sort of give it in a nutshell, the question of whether or not there is time, an intermediary state between death and rebirth, is not something that all Buddhists agree on, first of all. In early Nikaya Buddhism, there were some schools that taught there was an intermediary state, then some others who taught that it was immediate, the very next moment after the moment of death is the moment of rebirth. No
No in
intermediary
between. Yeah.
existence. And the idea that gains favor or ground in Mahayana circles was the idea that there was an intermediary state. And I believe it was Vasubandhu, in fact, in the Abhidharma Kosha, who, while he was still a, you know, Hinayana practicer, defended the idea of an intermediary state against the idea that there was none. And so that became sort of the mainstream Mahayana viewpoint, right? And basically what it is 7 times 7. So seven days times 7. So 49 days total. The 49th day is regarded as the pivotal day in which the next rebirth takes place. So in those 49 days, you would have, and you still do have in East Asian Buddhist societies, repeated but repeated services taking place up until the 49th day. And now people who are Shin Buddhists listening are wondering, oh, well, wait a minute. I thought as soon as we die, we are born in the Pure Land. So do we have to wait until 49 days? What's going on there? Well, the answer essentially is that this is a cultural tradition that has been, is mainstream in East Asian society, right? And so Jodo Shinshu as well, we also in our services, our funeral services, have the 49th day. But going back to the Bardo, we'll get to what is a funeral in Jodo Shinshu all about? So we'll get to that. Or the memorial service. Some people, if you have, say, a Christian funeral, well, then that's not a Buddhist funeral, right? So you're not necessarily going to have a funeral, but there might still be ways to memorialize that person in Buddhism, like I mentioned, with my aunt. So I want to share, and I wonder if I can share with my phone, but we'll find out, I guess. Let's see. Start broadcast. Oh, do I want to do that? I wonder. Okay, well, we'll see what happens here.
Okay.
Is my screen visible?
It's saying screen broadcast. You're sharing. Yeah, you're sharing. There we go. Yep, it's working.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Let me just move because can you see my screen it looks like my image is kind of.
Yeah, that won't be, I don't think I can do anything about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Okay, so this would be good reading if anyone is interested in the Bardo idea. So it's on Wikipedia, but it's pretty good. I think, of course, everyone knows that the Tibetan idea of the Bardo is kind of famous. And there's it discusses the different schools here. If I can highlight this, schools that did and did not accept that concept of an intermediate existence. And then we have some of the earliest references were actually in Sarvastivada, the school, which that makes sense because Vasubandhu was a Sarvastivadin before he converted to Mahayana. So, and I think it's going to mention, yeah, right here. So same school, but with some differences. Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha in the center of the screen, where he defends the concept, or he asserts the concept of a body, quote unquote, provisionally, that exists between death and rebirth, essentially. So far so good, right?
So,
and then
I
also,
mean, yeah, if Vasubandhu is teaching that, then I would think that would be
significant, right?
Yeah, because he's one of our Dharma masters.
Right. For Mahayana Buddhists, which we are, the intermediate state is a kind of a given. It's a, you know, how to say, basically something we accept, right? So, both the Mahavibhasa and the Abhidharma Kosha have the notion of the intermediate state. I'm trying to keep things I'm reading in the center of the screen. Hopefully that's clear.
It is,
but...
yeah, it is, yeah.
Okay.
It does. From my perspective, it definitely looks that way. So,
so lasting 7 times 7 days, 49 days. I mentioned before. Now, important to note, that's one view. There were also other views about how long and so on, but 49 days is the view that became mainstream in East Asian Buddhism. Okay, so now in Tibetan Buddhism, there's this whole other thing of categories and so on. As I'm just scrolling through, and this is not necessarily accepted by other. This was a sort of a unique thing that developed in Tibetan Buddhism that's not necessarily accepted by other East Asian Buddhists. Just to be clear. So that's kind of their,
now, when you say
concept, right?
When you say it's Tibetan, not accepted by other schools, are you saying like Vajrayana, or is it even more unique to just Tibetan Vajrayana? Do you see what I mean? Because there's Vajrayana, and then there's Tibetan Vajrayana. Yeah. So
know if Shingon, esoteric Japanese.
Yeah, I was going to say, is Shingon,
the Shingon school?
Does it have similar? Yeah, because that's basically Vajrayana, isn't it? Or at least similar to Vajrayana, isn't it? Yeah.
Now, we'll get to that in just a moment. So this is what I want to point out, and I think you already did. East Asian Buddhism generally accepts the main doctrines of the Yogacara tradition as taught by Vasubandhu and Asanga. And that includes the acceptance of the intermediate existence. Okay. Now, Dogen, getting a little closer to us, so to speak. Let's see what Dogen has to say. This is interesting. So I'll just read this. When you leave this is from the Shobo Ginzo, by the way. Dogen, founder of Soto Zen. When you leave this life and before you enter the next life, there is a place called an intermediary realm. You stay there for 7 days. You should resolve to keep, now he says you only stay there for 7 days. You should resolve to keep chanting the names of the 3 treasures without ceasing while you are there. After 7 days, you die in the intermediary realm and remain there for no more than 7 days. At this time, you can see and hear without hindrance, like having a celestial eye. Resolve to encourage yourself to keep chanting the names of the 3 treasures without ceasing. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. After passing through the intermediary realm, when you approach your parents to be conceived, this is your next parents in your next birth, resolve to maintain authentic wisdom. So according to Dogen, you're still conscious at this point, right? Keep chanting refuge in the 3 treasures in your mother's womb. Do not neglect chanting while you are given birth. Resolve deeply to dedicate yourself to chant and take refuge in the three treasures through the six sense roots. When your life ends, your eyesight will suddenly become dark. Know that this is the end of your life and be determined to chant, I take refuge in the Buddha. Then all Buddhas in the 10 directions will show compassion to you. Even if due to conditions you are bound to an unwholesome realm, you will be able to be born in the Deva realm or in the presence of the Buddha. Bow and listen to the Buddha. So that's from section 94 of the Shobo Ginzo. Now, what's interesting about this is clearly something that you as the person dying and being reborn are doing, right? Not something that other people can necessarily do for you.
Yeah.
And that's in keeping with, Zen, of course, which is a path of sages, essentially, according to Shinran. At its core, it is a self-powered, path of self-realization. And so, but this is a tall order for you and me. For ordinary people who aren't preparing
Skilled?
their entire lives for this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that it wouldn't be possible, maybe, but this is hard stuff, right?
Exactly.
Now, sutra, what does the Pure Land Sutras say? I'm going to stop sharing briefly. I'm not
before we
sure
go on
how
to
I
that
can
really
do
quickly.
that.
I just want to say,
yes,
what I didn't express really very well earlier is the main thing when I would do this kind of personal thing, sort of mentally reaching out to friends or family in the Bardo state, I would say take refuge in Amida as what,
right.
to sum up.
Yeah.
That's when you can, if it's now or if it's at a later lifetime, take refuge when you can. If you take refuge in Amida Buddha, take refuge, say Nembutsu, try to think of his land, think of the Buddha, think of going to his land, that sort of thing. But take refuge, that's the main thing, either in your current state or in a future lifetime when you rebirth when you can. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
And that's exactly what Dogen says too, is take refuge in the three
that's why it
treasures,
made me think, oh, that's kind of cool that take refuge.
Now, so that is what Dogen is telling people to do. Now, an interesting question arises, or should arise. What do the three Pure Land Sutras say about the Bardo and this stuff? And the answer is they don't say anything about the Bardo. What the sutra says is that a person who cannot maintain right mindfulness at the end of their life, which is the lowest grade, the lowest state, right?
The lowest grade of the lowest lotus.
Yes, they encounter a good teacher on their deathbed who tells them to simply say the name of the Buddha, say the name of Amida 10 times. And they say that they can't maintain right mindfulness, they're in pain, they're whatever, their mind is distracted. They can't do the thing that Dogen says, right?
Exactly.
They can't, and they are told to simply say the name with your lips, say the name, and through the power of the vow, as Shandao says, because the Buddha vowed that those who say the name will be born in the Pure Land, they are indeed born in the Pure Land. That's as far as the sutra goes in talking about the afterlife. And it doesn't say anywhere in the sutras that people who are dead can be, encouraged or told to, say the name. It just says people who are on their deathbeds can be told and encouraged to say the name. Now, so that's the sutra point of view, right? What the sutras say. So the next question you probably have is, well, what are Jodo Shinshu funerals all about? The person is already dead, right? So what is the point of the funeral? if
Oh
in
wait,
Jodo
well, you know what? Can
Shinshu,
I just say one more thing
yes, please.
before we move
Yes,
on?
yes,
Just something
absolutely.
you made me think of
Sure,
while we were just talking about that
sure.
was my idea with doing this also is not that I think they're going to be that they're going to suddenly, just because I say it, be able to do it, or do you know what I mean? Or that it has anything to do with my power. It's, it's Amida, and that's what I'll have on my mind. It's Amida that's going to save you, and that's what I'll say to them. It's Amida's power. It's Amida's vow that's gonna bring you to his pure land if you if you entrust, if you take refuge in him. But the other thing that I would, the other idea of this is not, it's the hoping that maybe a seed, a kernel, the slightest kernel would be planted. Do you know what I mean? That maybe later on in some lifetime. Do
Yeah,
you know what I
and it
mean?
is well, and it's quite the assumption, isn't it?
Yeah,
That this person needs all that, right? And
true,
that we
true,
can encourage
true,
them to have it.
true.
Like, because um, you
Yeah,
don't know who's a returnee from the Pure Land, who is guiding you, who
true,
is
true.
quite the assumption, right? We're sort of sticking our oar in, as it were, um,
True.
into
There's kind of an
the
arrogance to it
the
all,
ocean
isn't
of the
it?
vow.
There's a
We're
little bit
sort
of
of sticking a little bit of arrogance. I
yeah,
would say. I don't
it's a
want
bit,
to be too harsh,
you,
but
you don't have to mince words with me at all. Definitely. Um,
um,
it wouldn't be the
the
first time I
fact
realized that
is,
I was arrogant.
well, we all have that problem. I am far from the least arrogant person
Yeah.
that I know. Um, but what we're doing now is, as we're having this conversation, we're uncovering maybe new and better ways of learning, of
Approaching
seeing
this.
things.
Yeah.
We're
Of
getting
seeing
closer
things.
to the reality of existence,
Yeah.
in ways that are essentially in keeping with Shinshu, because it's all about us awakening to the truth of things, right?
Yeah.
And not necessarily holding on to our own viewpoints. So,
And about being in accord
um,
with the teaching and with our own limitations as bamboo.
right, yes, and about also sometimes our views and our points of view can be actually self-limiting. Ironically, they can limit our perception of infinite life and infinite light,
Mm.
and the unblockable, inconceivable working of great compassion, which goes
Boom.
far beyond, as Shinron says, in Tanisho, however much we may wish to save someone,
We
we
cannot
can't
say
save them as
we
we would
cannot
wish.
act. Yeah, we cannot save them as we wish. Exactly.
So, what is the solution? He says to that. It's not to work harder to save them as we would wish. He says, we are born in the Pure Land, and then after we ourselves have received that enlightenment, we can work freely to save everyone. And that includes, you know, your nephew, my aunt, everybody,
My
that
cousin.
we would wish to benefit can and will be benefited through that. So the true, and that's why it says in Tanisho, the true compassion in the Pure Land path is first to be born in the Pure Land, and then to work for the benefit of all beings.
Yeah. Yes.
Um,
Boom. I never
and
boom. Like this is kind of a boom moment for me. You saying this because I've never looked at it when I've wondered about me doing this or
mm,
thinking about this activity and wondering what the teachings are. I never looked at it from that angle, that
yeah,
it might be a barrier to me,
yeah,
it
yeah,
might be
yes, could be.
an issue with,
Um,
I just never looked at it, you know. And again, that's that
yeah.
arrogance, the arrogance of our ignorance as bumbo.
Yes, in the ego,
The ego.
our ego is always popping up and
Yeah.
saying, "Can I join the party?" Wants to be the center of attention.
Exactly.
every time, right?
Mhm.
But who is the main actor here? It's Amida. It's not us. And at the end of this conversation, I'm going to share a passage, and then we'll rethink in the light of what we're discussing. And I think some things will become very clear, maybe for the first time. Some things will pop out. But okay. So now we discussed all that. So what is the Bardo? More or less, we've got an idea of what it is, or the intermediary state. And then okay. So Jodo Shinshu. Funerals. What exactly is the purpose of funerals in Jodo Shinshu? Okay, so in a Jodo Shinshu funeral, we're going to be chanting gavas from the sutras. We're going to be reciting Shoshinge. We're going to be reciting the Nimbutsu. There's going to be reading of the Gobunsho, the letters of Rinyo. But nowhere in any of those texts, of any of those sutra texts, is there anything directed to the person who is deceased to tell them, do this, do that, you should take refuge, etc. Nowhere in any of those texts. And you might wonder, why is that? Well, and the answer is because that person's birth in the Pure Land is determined by Amida Buddha. It's not determined by you, by me, by anybody else. It's determined by Amida Buddha and by the power of Amida Buddha's vow. And that power, Shinran says, is inconceivable. We don't know what is going on, And so in the funeral in Jodo Shinshu, we leave everything up to the working of Amida Buddha. And what the purpose of the funeral or the memorial service in Jodo Shinshu is it's for us. It's for the people who are the relatives, the loved ones, the friends of the person who has passed on, to reflect. It's an opportunity to hear the Dharma, essentially. And what are we hearing? Well, like you said, we're hearing the message of impermanence. This person is showing us that that we are, mortal, and that at some point we too may and will pass on. And that's what the Buddha said, and at his Mahaparinirvana, right? He said, I am now showing you, I am demonstrating impermanence for you. By passing on. So don't think you can escape from this if the Buddha can't. Right? And he says, those who see me only in my body do not see me. Those who see that enlightenment, nirvana, the Dharma is eternal, truly see me. So after I am gone, the Dharma will be your teacher, is what Shakyamuni said. So it's an opportunity to hear that message again, right? The Dharma, the message of the basic message of the Dharma. What else are we reflecting on? We are giving thanks that this person was in our lives, that we were enabled, that this person touched us in whatever way they were a part of our lives, and we are celebrating that the person's life with gratitude for that person's being in our life, in however a way that was, however small, however big, however it might be. So to recap, in Jodo Shinshu, the funeral service is not for directed to the person who has passed on. It's directed to the audience. It's directed to us who are left behind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why we do the funeral service. Now, you know, popularly, people sometimes think that in Japan, especially, a lot of people are sort of cradle Buddhists, you know, like good cradle Catholics. And people don't necessarily know what the true significance of the funeral is. Some people who are Jodo Shinshu family, but they don't necessarily even know about the teaching, may well assume that it's some sort of ritual to sort of, and at the 49th day, the person is, oh, you know, they were born in the Pure Land without any problems, kind of, you know, thing. And they don't even know what the sutra means necessarily when the priest is chanting. It's just, you know, the priest is chanting something and making the person be born in the Pure Land, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And of course, we know that, and anyone who is truly, you know, a serious believer, you know, to use that word, of Jodo Shinshu, of course, knows about, you know, Shinjin, what Shinjin is, and Nimbutsu, and the significance of all that, right? But that's not something that everybody necessarily knows, right? So again, the funeral is an opportunity to present the Dharma to people who might not usually have an opportunity to hear it. A lot of times people won't even visit a temple, you know, unless there's a funeral, right? So this is an opportunity to present the Dharma to people who might not be thinking about the Dharma, you know, very often.
Exactly, yeah.
So on a practical level, that's also what it's about. Now, if you look at the letters of Rinyo, what does he say in the letter on white ashes? He's lamenting how, you know, people pass on and their bodies are cremated and they turn into white ashes. So then what does he say? What should we do? Well, he doesn't say, you know, he says we should realize, oh, yes,
White ashes.
white ashes. Yeah. And that is, do you want to explain the significance of what you just showed as well?
That's not anyone. That's not, by the way, anyone that I know or any
Okay.
person.
Yeah.
It just, they're just the yeah. Anyway, they're just the yeah. Though I just thought I'd show that some white ashes. Not this isn't this isn't actually human white ashes at all.
Right.
This is more for anyway.
Yeah. Exactly. And so what should we be doing? Renyo says.
You can explain that if you want. If you want to go into the.
Oh yeah. Well, in you know, Japanese Buddhism, person is cremated, and then their ashes are interred, you know, in a tomb, basically, or a cemetery. And there's you know, rituals regarding that and so on. I know one of the reasons why it's very, very, very rude in East Asia to take food from another person's chopsticks is because there's a ritual in which the bones of the deceased are passed with chopsticks by the relatives as a memorial. And so you don't want to make that mistake.
Yeah.
It's very, very shocking to people in East Asia. Anyway,
I can see why
so
symbolically. I can see why that would be.
Right, yeah.
I could see, you know, if you're taking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
I won't say I have not made that mistake, by the way.
Okay. I never knew that. I never knew any of that.
Yeah.
So, but I can see why it would be. Yeah.
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 Well, it reminds people of, you know, the person who died, so
Yeah.
it's kind of.
And then you're
Anyway.
eating that, so it's a bit,
Yeah, it's culture, you know,
yeah.
basically etiquette, all of that stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, so
yeah. Anyway,
in this conversation, coming back to the funeral service, I do have something more I would like to share.
Please, yeah, please do.
Let me find it. I hope. Let's see. Okay. And if you're interested, I can share this actually, this this file. It's a PDF. It shows the entire Jodo Shinshu funeral service in English. Hold on. Screen, I think is what I share. Start broadcast. Okay, it should be sharing, I think. Okay, are we visible?
We are. There it is. Funeral
Okay, so this is
information.
funeral
A guide to
information, guide to
planning-
planning a Buddhist
Yeah.
funeral from Fresno Buddhist temple.
It is a bit
And
small. I'm wondering if
yeah, is
there.
is
Okay,
it
that's a bit
sort of
better.
visible
Yeah,
now?
yeah, it's a bit better.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a bit better. Yeah.
So this, the preface, it actually shares that verse I was referencing about from the Mahaparinirvana Sutra that the Buddha preached at the end of his life. And this has, in case you're interested, the entire sequence of events. So everything that happens during the funeral is listed here.
Excellent. Yeah.
Including the explanation of everything that occurs. So let's scroll down.
You can make it smaller a bit so you don't have to keep. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But if
okay, here we go. Well, it says participants, ushers, duties. Yeah, sequence of events. So
okay.
this is everything that is going to be
smaller
occurring.
so you don't have to keep. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So there's beginning with the makuragyo, it's called, or pillow service. Essentially, it's when it's the actual beginning of the service, and then you have the soshiki, which takes place in the funeral hall, or the usually it's the funeral hall or the hondo. So you notice there's a lot of different things. One is saying that's interesting is this on the top of this page, the Homyo Juyo, a presentation of the Buddhist name. For those of us like you and me who have received a Buddhist name, it's just, that's our name. But some people don't get a name during their lifetime. So they can be given a Buddhist name at the end of their
Yes, I remember when
life.
when I made that decision that I was going to sort of reclaim my Hamyo a while back and did that video, and in my research I was trying to remember why some of the things you were saying were familiar to me about the service isn't for the person, it's for the people that are there, it's for them to hear the Dharma, it's for the people who are in attendance at the funeral, and that's what. And when they get they're given their if they don't have a Hamyo, they're given it at that time, and it's for the people in attendance. It's for, do you know what I mean? It's for, all of this is for, and I was trying to remember and that's what, because some of what you were saying sounded familiar and I couldn't remember why. And that's why when I had done a bit of research into the kind of Hangwanji, tradition a bit about Hamyos, and it talked about when you're given that at the funeral, and it's not for, and then explain that the whole funeral process isn't for, it's for those in attendance. It's, to hear the Dharma.
And it's important to note the Homyo doesn't guarantee the person's birth in the Pure Land or anything like that, right? It's not like but it is given. And then and of course we're encouraged to get a Homyo during our lifetime, right? But for those who didn't, weren't able or didn't want to, or whatever, for whatever reason they didn't receive a Homyo, it can be given to them in the funeral service. So then we have, chanting the sutra, and it's Shoshinge. As always, we say the Nimbutsu. We recite Wasan, and look at the Wasan. The treasure ocean of virtuous power is filled to overflowing, though the defiled waters of deluded passions are not diminished. The holy ones of the pure flower of the Tathagata are born from the flower of true awakening. They quickly satisfy all the wishes of sentient beings. This is sort of a different translation, but
Beautiful.
those who are born in the Pure Land are born from the flower of the Buddha's enlightenment. Right.
White lotuses.
That's what it's saying. Yeah.
We are white. He calls us white lotuses.
Yeah.
Pure white lotuses.
Or,
yeah. Anyway.
Right. Okay. So then the Eikoku, the transfer verse. Now this is, it's traditionally it's understood as I transfer the merit of this service to all beings so that together we may be born in the Pure Land. Well, in Jodo Shinshu, we don't do the transferring of merit. So this is really more of an affirmation that the merit of this service, the merit of this truth is being transferred by Amida. It's really working on us, right? And on everyone. Okay, so then I'm going to just go through this a little briefly. If you're interested, by all means,
sure.
I think we have a speaking of samsara, we have some samsaric noises going by here.
I did hear that one.
So we read a history, a personal history of the person. Again, this is all celebrating this person's life, and we are grateful for this person for being in our lives, right? There's a eulogy, it's called, but it's actually words of condolence given by a good friend. We sing another Gada. It's another encouraging. Notice how this is all condolences to the people who are gathered. Nothing is directed to the person who is already passed. There's a Dharma talk. We read Gobunsho, the letter of Rinyo, and it's usually always the letter on the white ashes. And what does that letter encourage us to do at the end? To realize faith and recite the Nimbutsu. Closing remarks, etc. So, and then finally the burial. So that's the basic outline. Now, let me read this. In the tantric and popular traditions of Buddhism, okay, let's look at Chuin. Chuin literally means, this is the term for Bardo in Japanese and in Chinese, and it means the first 49-day period after death. It's marked by observances every 7 days until the 49th day. And sorry, there's ambulances going by.
No worries.
Hopefully that's the last one. This is very, the funeral is very important in Japanese Buddhism. I sometimes explain, the funeral has the importance in Japan that the wedding has in the US. And that's why I actually think if I get Tokudo, I think a better way to spread the Dharma in the US, even more so than funerals, is actually going to be by officiating weddings, because culturally that's just more significant in the US. The funeral is not so much made much of, but in Japan, your funeral is way more important than your wedding.
I have
traditionally.
I have.
Which is an interesting culture for those of us who come from a Western perspective. But anyway, okay. So
it's very important because it might be the only times in people's lifetime that they'll hear the Dharma.
Yeah, very well.
They'll really encounter the Dharma in any kind of significant way.
Right.
So.
Yep.
Anyway. Yeah.
So, what does it say here? In the tantric and popular traditions of Buddhism, the soul or karmic energy of a person is believed to be in a suspended state for 49 days before taking another form. Rituals were conducted and offerings to the Buddha were made every 7th day until the 49th day in the hopes of helping the deceased to bring about a higher birth. This 49-day period was a period when the deceased was thought to be in the shadowy world or yin, hence the term Chuin. This belief became deeply rooted in Far Eastern cultures, and it was a widespread practice in China by the later Tang dynasty, and in Japan was a observed from the time of the Emperor Kamu, or around 781 to 806 AD. Jodo Shinshu, which categorically denies the efficacy of such observances, nevertheless observes chewing in grateful memory of the deceased and yet another opportunity to listen to the Dharma. In other words, the Hoji and Jodo Shinshu is not for the sake of the dead, but is indeed for the sake of the living. In our remembering the deceased, we acknowledge the influence of the deceased karma on our lives. We are the inheritors of the collective karma of our ancestors who caused us to meditate on our own mortality and listen more intently to the Dharma. So that's the meaning of the funeral and the significance of the funeral in Jodo Shinshu. Now,
Excellent.
With all that said, I would like to share a passage from, and I think, so going back to what you mentioned about you feel this desire, you want to ask the person or encourage the person. And again, that's of course a very human desire, right? Yeah, that's kind of like the basic, why we have funerals almost. It's probably going way back. People wanted to pray for their departed person's next state and want them to be happy, right?
Yep, and feel a connection with them, and
right, yeah, and but I want to read a passage. Let me I'll share my screen one more time. Here. Let me get the passage up. Okay. And I know we've read this before, but it's always a good idea to read the sutra. Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen one more time here. Start. Okay, we should be showing up.
it's getting there. There we go.
All right. Okay, so I'll just read this, and let's keeping in mind, what we've been discussing. Let's just read this and see what happens. The Buddha prays. This is from the Larger Sutra. It's from I think a different translation of the Larger Sutra, but it's from the Larger Sutra on Immeasurable Light. The Buddha prays the excellence of Amida Buddha's light. The light of Amida Buddha is surpassingly good. It is luminous and wondrous among all that is good. It is pleasing beyond compare, boundlessly excellent. Amida Buddha's light is pure, without the least defilement or diminution. Amida Buddha's light is superbly beautiful, 100 million times more brilliant than the sun and moon. It is the brightest among the lights of all the Buddhas. It is the most excellent of lights, the most surpassing of lights, the most pleasing of lights. It is king among the Buddhas. It is the most exalted of lights, by far the most radiant of lights. It illuminates the innumerable dim and dark places in innumerable worlds, so that they are always splendidly bright.
Including the Bardo
among
state.
all human beings, yes, including whatever intermediary states of existence.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Among all human beings and even insects that leap or worms that crawl, there is none that does not see Amida Buddha's light. Among those that see it, there is none that does not come to possess a heart of compassion and rejoice. Among all beings in the world who are possessed of licentious desires or wrath or folly, there is none who, on seeing Amida Buddha's light, does not perform good acts. Among those in the realms of hell, beasts, hungry ghosts, or asheras, where they suffer pain and affliction, there is none who, upon seeing Amida Buddha's light, does not gain respite and, although not acquiring remedy, obtain emancipation from sorrow and pain after death. Amida Buddha makes that light. Amida Buddha makes that light and name heard throughout the boundless, unlimited, countless lands of the Buddhas in the 8 quarters, the zenith and the nadir. There is none among devas and human beings who does not hear and know them. Of those who hear and know them, none fails to attain emancipation.
Oh.
Now,
So whose
why do you
job is it to reach
suppose?
out to people in the Bardo state? It's not my job. It's not our job.
Yes, to ask the
It's not our job.
question. Who is doing the reaching out? Who is doing the shining of
Exactly.
the light?
It's already
Who
being
is
done.
doing
It's already in hand.
the?
We got this.
Who is making the name heard?
We got. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Amida Buddha. It's
So
like
there
we
is
got this, Scott.
no.
You know, there's not a problem. Okay, you can relax. All right, it's covered. It's covered by
Yeah.
the ultimate Buddha. You know, of beginningless past.
Yeah.
You know, it's good. So
And so Amida Buddha's light in name and working is totally sufficient for your nephew, for my aunt, for everyone, just as it's totally sufficient for you and me. And so what do we do? We thank that person. We reflect on how they touched our life, and we turn them over to the working, the all-powerful working of unlimited compassion, of unlimited light, of unlimited wisdom, with the knowledge that their birth is determined by Amida Buddha, not by us. That's it.
exactly.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu.
And what a relief! What a relief to know that it's not dependent on us. See, one problem I see with the, people get into like trying to get the person to hear and so on, and giving directions to the dead and so on is, well, it opens the door to all of these insecurities and anxieties. Like, what if I'm not saying it loud enough, or what if I'm not saying it at the right time,
or what if they're
the
offended?
person,
What if they're offended?
or who knows, right?
It disagrees
That's
with
what,
their, beliefs or
yeah. And so, but that's what happens sometimes when we stick our oar in, so to speak, into, and so how much better to just entrust everything,
leave it to Amida,
to the working of Amida, in the knowledge that that person is exactly where they need to be, and that everything is prepared for that person.
Everything's in hand.
Yes. There's nothing is out of control.
It's called the primal vow. It's called the primal vow for a reason. Exactly. It's called.
So that's really, when you brought up this topic, that's kind of what I wanted to share with you. And I know it's a lot, especially when people are struggling with grief and bereavement and it's a lot. But just something to consider, something to think about, and think about the relief of leaving it all up to the master of birth and death. We leave, I think Ziken Inagaki sensei maybe said, I leave birth and death to the master of birth and death. Who is the master of birth and death? Amida Buddha.
Exactly. Yeah.
I leave everything up to Amida Buddha. So this is the point of view of, Tariki, of other power, of leaving everything up to the working of the other power. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say on this topic. And do you have any thoughts? Do you want to, probe deeper?
Oh no, it just
questions?
I mean, I really wanted to know what the some of what the Jodo Shinshu teaching was, the approach was. What did Shinran have to say? Renyu have to say? What is the Hongwanji tradition you know, and but I didn't sort of realize, you know, and I did want an answer to like, should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? You know, and I didn't realize just how personal that would be. Like the outcome of that question would would reveal about what I was doing. You know,
Mm,
would reveal about the kind of, you know,
yeah,
egoic, self-powered kind of approach to it, and the
yeah.
kind of arrogance of that, and you know, I didn't really see that coming. That was kind of a it was a little bit of a boom. Yeah, it was a bit of a boom
uh,
for me. And
yeah.
you know, it made me realize too, you know, when I was at the funeral, you know, it was quite recent.
Mm,
It was Friday, and
hmm
you know,
hmm
I pretty much, I'll just say I just cried through the whole thing,
hmm
punctuated by, you know, certain moments when people were talking about certain memories,
hmm
and you know,
Yeah.
it was just I was gone. Then I was just I just was gone, you know, gushing with, you
Yeah.
know, but you know, some of it, you know, wasn't just the bereavement and the so a lot
Mm,
of it was, well, actually the whole time was on my mind was Amida Buddha and this teaching,
yeah.
and how grateful I was to have this teaching, and how grateful I was for Buddhism, and how grateful that I was,
hmm
you know, and that I hoped, you know,
Yeah.
that someday my nephew would respond to
hmm
that light, you know, would encounter that, you know,
Yeah.
encounter the teaching in some way, and you know, but again, who knows? Like you say, we don't know
Well, Amida Buddha
who's
has
already
that taken
returned.
care of.
Yeah, exactly.
Amida Buddha has
But
that taken care of,
but
and you
yeah,
also
so
don't
but
know,
part of it was just
you know.
the gratitude that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have the
yeah. The
teaching like that.
gratitude.
You know,
Yeah.
there was still that other part of me that was, you know, like now that
hmm
I see that now for what it is. But the other side is just the whole time, this part of the reason for my tears, part of the reason was joy. It was, you know, the
Mm,
bereavement mixed with this
hmm
joy that I had, you know, that I have this
Yeah.
solution, that Amita has provided this solution, you know,
Yeah.
that I've encountered this in this precious human lifetime, and I have this
Yeah.
opportunity, and I have, you know, these talks, these
hmm
dialogues, and I've had all the other dialogues I've had, and all the other things I've read, and all the, you know, all the
Yeah.
people that I've encountered on this path, you know, and just, do you know what I mean? All through the working of Amida, all
Yeah.
through, you know, Amida's natural working
Yeah.
of his vow. And
And
just
when
so
we
that
are
was
all,
strongly there. That was part of the reason for it was tears of joy that I was in a weird way at a few, you know, mixed with
Mhm.
sadness and grief. And you know what I mean? There was this joy, this underlying, you know, great gratitude for the, you know,
Yeah.
the Buddha and for the teaching.
Yeah. And I think
Anyway,
that's exactly what it's for. It's all about, uh, in
yeah,
Jodo Shinshu,
yeah.
the funeral, the whole purpose of it. So.
And my father-in-law ran it. He's a Quaker.
hmm Oh yeah,
Um, and so it was done very kind of
yeah,
universally. It was very, you know what I mean? He was able to
yeah.
incorporate, just acknowledge
Inclusive.
everyone's belief. Yeah, inclusive. That's the word I'm looking
Yeah.
for. You know, I said to him afterward, I said, well, you'd make a fine Unitarian Universalist minister. He's anyway, but just it was very inclusive and very, it was just really well done. Even when they did at one point, because it was kind of it was fairly appropriate. They the prodigal son was
Mm,
story was read or mentioned, or
mhm.
a certain translation of it, I think, was,
Beautiful story.
yeah. And all the whole time I was seeing it in the Buddhist you know, I was hearing the Buddhist version. You know, I was recalling. It was just naturally came to my mind. You know, I think
Mm,
it's in the at least one place is in the Lotus Sutra, where it talks
yeah.
about the, you know, and the it's it's kind of it's a different, very different, you know, story,
Parallels.
but
Yeah.
you know, that was mine on my mind, and I was hearing, and
hmm
it was easy to almost interpret the the story from the Buddhist view, because do you know what I mean? Know
Yeah.
The Buddhist story, and the, you know, it's where the Buddha is seeking us out. You know, you know, we don't even know we're the prodigal son. We don't even we
Yeah.
don't even know where we just forgot who
Yeah.
the heck we
Yeah.
are in our ignorance and our bamboo,
Yeah.
in our kleshas and our define. We have no idea what we are, or what our original, what the true nature is. You know, our Buddha. We have no clue. You know, and so
Yeah.
he sent out, you know, the
Mhm.
his people to find him first, and then okay, well, he's so living so rough.
Yeah.
Let's start slow. You know, let's give him a little work to do. Give him a job, okay, and then give him a little bit more. You know, and then bring him here. You know.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So it's just, and it was that, you know, it's all the skillful means. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was quite a nice reflection at the when that was read, because all on my mind was the Buddhist,
Mm.
you know, version of that, the Buddhist
Yeah.
story of that.
And keep in mind too, you can always do it. I mean, we can always do a sim whether you're, have Chokudo or not, it's irrelevant. I mean, if you want to chant Sambutsuge, a short gatha from the Large Sutra, you can say the Echo at the end and then say the Nimbutsu. But just say it in gratitude, say it in with the spirit of being grateful for that person's, role in your life, touching your life, and then just leave it to Amida, is what I would recommend. And that is really the spirit in which we approach everything, really, as in Buddhists. It's not, we're not the heroes
No,
of our own story.
no,
It's Amida Buddha is the hero.
exactly,
And
exactly.
so, yeah, this has been a great discussion. I'm really glad you mentioned this topic because, as I shared, I personally too, have had and will have. I mean, there's, because impermanence is always a part of existence. We're always having these opportunities to really come into contact with the truth of the Dharma.
Exactly.
And so it is important. It's an important
Definitely.
part of life.
I'd like
I
to do a
believe.
similar thing on ask us do a similar thing on Buddhist cosmology,
Mm,
how it's
mhm.
viewed, the Jodo Shinshu view, the Jodo Shinshu teaching, the Hangguanji, because I have a feeling there'll be similar booms for me,
Yeah, I
very
mean,
personal, you know, and
could
realizations
be.
of how certain
Yeah.
things are barriers, you know, in my incorporating of other kind of Buddhist teachings about Buddhist
Mm,
cosmology might be my approach to those things, I should say.
yeah.
So I'd like to do a
Well,
similar thing about that. Yeah.
that's the great thing about these discussions we have, right?
Hmm.
Is on both sides we're talking about the Dharma, we're talking about what our Dharma masters have said,
Yeah.
going all the way back to Vasubandhu, Nagarjuna, and so we are truly, as we're discussing, we're also receiving the guidance of these
Exactly.
people who have
Yeah.
gone before. So that's why
And Amida illuminating the barriers
yes, absolutely, yeah,
all the way through. So
yeah,
anyway, well, thank you so much. It's really been a great discussion. Thanks for, you know,
yeah.
researching
My
it a bit
pleasure,
and being
and
willing, being
thank you.
flexible to
Yeah,
do a little something a little bit different than we might normally have done.
yeah,
So shall we take
absolutely.
us out with some
Yes.
nimbutsu?
All
Excellent.
right. Gasho.
Gosh,
Namo Amida Butsu.
Minabutsu,
Namo Amida
Nama
Butsu.
Mirabutsu,
Namo Amida
Nama
Butsu.
Mirabutsu,
Namanda.
Naman,
Namanda.
Namandavats,
Namanda.
Namandavats, Namanda, Nam.
All right. Well, I will.
Thank you so much. We'll
We'll
continue
talk
to enjoy
again.
your journeys and your
Yeah.
plannings and your
Thank you.
arrangements, and I hope it goes well. Um,
It is so far. Things are in motion, as it were. So
excellent,
yeah,
as they always are,
as they always are.
always changing.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you
Right.
so much.
Take
Great
care.
talking. All
All
right.
the best until
Take
next
care.
time. Bye now.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.